This is Ashley Reed from Ling 4353, going over lesson critique. And I'm going to start with adding that I did make several changes that I will go over as to why I did this and the reasons behind it. But the first point I'm going to make is the objectives. All the changes I made, I tried to highlight as many as I could. I highlighted all of them in purple, so you'll be able to see the changes from the original text. The objectives in themselves don't have any issues. It is the fact that I believe the terminal and enabling objectives should be switched. My reasons are the terminals give an overall goal of the lesson, and enabling objectives are step by step. The original lesson plan had these switched, in my opinion, and were really bad at, just communicating what the lesson plan was supposed to be. It was very confusing. If I had a grade, if I had to use a rubric for the original lesson objectives, they would have been just ones, twos. But by switching them, it not only improved uh, the rate of which the grade I would give these lesson plan or these objectives for the lesson plan, but it made the lesson plan make a lot more sense because of it. So overall, originally I would have again just given these terminal enabling objectives like ones. But this way, by switching them, it improved the you know these steps and the goals of the lesson for the day. And I would give these new ones 4 in managing and measuring and how related they are and how clear they are. They're so much more clear now. I would definitely give it a 4 in the clear rubric section. It's just much more. It's much more easier to follow this way. The next part I want to just go over really quick is I made several adjustments to the lesson plan. And again, I'll go over my reasons why. Mostly, if this lesson plan was left, I try to imagine if I was a teacher and I left this for a substitute, how would the substitute interpret my lesson plan? Would it be easy for them to understand or difficult? And I found a lot of the sentence structures and the words used, I would find it difficult if I was at sub and this was left for me. So I tried using that kind of perspective, and that's why I made certain changes. As you can see, the first, the introduction, I think that I as a teacher would actually want to use idioms because we're introducing that as material. I think it's a great introduction into the new material, just a little bit, and it also has the students, the students will have to use the previous lesson of communication breakdowns by using, sentences and phrases they've already learned from the previous lesson. So that's why I just changed that because I would want the sub or the teacher to use idioms. It's new material and it is still difficult and new. So you're not even really changing it. You're just using idioms as a focal point for the students to kind of focus on. The introduction, the educational value is, again, the activity not only introduces new material, but also has the students use the previously learned material from the last class. I think it would make the students a little more comfortable if you kind of ease them into this new territory. I don't think this is very communicative because, again, the students are they're interacting with the teacher, and also you're just introducing material, you're not having the students talk back or interact with each other. You don't really have anything to go with. There's nothing really to say that this is communicative. Not at all. Activity 1 that the students will be participating in, I changed a little bit of the order because the order for me didn't really make sense. It didn't flow as well. This way, the teacher has to have the students interact more with the teacher. The teacher asks the students, "Are you familiar with any, this phrase, this phrase?" And some students might, you actually might have students know what some of these words are, some of these phrases are. And then you introduce, situations that the idioms are used in. Since they already have a handout, which you've given them, the students will at least have a reference point to, see if they actually do know these. And again, the value of it is that the activity introduces idioms, that it introduces new idioms for the students, and it also it also attaches the meaning behind that idioms, which can sometimes be a little difficult to explain if you're just talking. This way, with a handout, the students are get more familiar, and they attach the functions of these idioms, what they mean to what you say. It's raining cats and dogs. It means it's raining very hard. Um, and so I think that's really helpful for students because the students will actually hear these in real world conversations, and it's not as I still don't think it's a communicative activity, even though it introduces real world material, which is great. But I don't think it's very negative because I don't think that's negative at all because the teacher's not going to be able to have communicative activities all day. There's going to be some activities that are just, you can't really have them be as communicative as someone else would want them to be, I suppose. But I think it's great to actually introduce this material and go over it with students first because you go into activity 2. And again, another major change I made to this original document is actually I took out the teacher demonstration because there were several reasons. The main ones were that it takes time away from class, and even though that's 2 minutes, that's still 2 minutes that could be for the students. It also, you take class material away from the students because, in the original it said, don't use these again, these, cards. But I think that's very odd. I thought it was very odd, and I don't think that students would benefit from a teacher demonstration because, again, you should be much more hands-on when you're doing some kind of activity. And also, you're doing a demonstration for one activity instead of the rest of them as well. Wouldn't you want to have a demonstration for all of these activities if that's your pattern? So again, I just didn't think it was very useful. I thought it was very, it made something more complicated than it needed to be. And it didn't promote any kind of communicative activity at all. It was all teacher-centered. And of course, I will say before these other activities are considered, I consider them teacher-centered far more, which is fine. Again, sometimes you need those teacher-centered activities to explain material, go over lessons, but when you go to activity 2, originally that's just the teacher talking. And even though I think that's a great exercise tool, I did not think it was necessary because the teacher can just explain, briefly to the students what they want them to do, and I just didn't think it should have been part of the lesson. Again, if I was a sub or a different teacher and I was reading this, I would have completely understood it than, saying, oh, I need you to demonstrate this to the students and it's going to take time and you're going to take the materials away. So that's why I changed that. And again, the educational value of this, the students work together. This is actually what I consider the real first communicative activity that's really solid. It hits a lot of points to me. It promotes working together, using real world references. It goes from a teacher-centered classroom to a student-teacher classroom, and I think it's a really good. Activity. I think it's great. It focuses on form and function, automaticity, and strategic involvement of the students. So I think it's great. I think this is a great activity. I did not touch this at all. I thought it was perfect. Activity 3. I changed this only a little bit because I thought it was a bit vague. Again, it's just the instructions are clear, but it's just a vague description of the students. Originally it said the students will, work on a story, but I think you need to be more focused. So I changed this just to say, the students will make a story about a conversation they had with a friend. I think it's a great focal point because students can work on that theme from outwards. I think it's I think this is another really great activity because it works on, again, real world references because the students have to use idioms in a story, and it allows the students to connect those forms to the functions you use it to. It also increases that student-centered activity as well, the element of a student-centered classroom. And the teacher kind of takes this back role, from, a controller, to a resource. And also, I really like that promoted collaboration and student automaticity. I really like that. I feel like this activity is very strong with a communicative outlook on it. And with that, we go into, the closure of this lesson to, story presentation. I only just changed the word, again, the wording, some of the wording on there just confused me, so I just changed it to make it more clear. Students will represent their story conversation. I think it's really great. I think it's a great exercise. It's a very good flow. And I think this activity, was added because students need to work on pronunciation as well as public speaking English. People don't really think about the public speaking aspect of speaking English in a, for a non-native English speaker. So I think it's really great on that. Again, I think this is a really good lesson with communicative, even though it's a little less communicative than the previous activities because the students are just talking, but I still think it's really good. It makes them focus on fluency and accuracy, so I think that's a really good focal point. And so the last part, the last section of the class would have been, the focus on the next lesson, which is great. I think that's a good, briefly introduce new material to the classroom. And this allows students to think of the new type of language as compared to the difference between formal and informal speech. This is not communicative to me at all, and but I do think it's important to have, and I think it's a good step because you're slowly moving from informal to formal speech. The focus of the lesson, the focus of the class changes for that. And the last, very, very last section of idiom story homework, I think is really great. It's, extra classwork allows students to practice what they learned, and it makes them practice creating authentic sentences as well. Although students won't be able to work or communicate with other classmates or the instructor, and they have to rely on themselves for this activity, I think it does promote automaticity. It promotes some communicative aspects, and I think that's really a really good positive point as well. So with all of this lesson plan structured out like this, I think it's a very obvious to me that this lesson plan is promoting, PPP, because the first part of this lesson plan, it had where the teacher introduces the material. She talks about it, he talks about it, introduces the material. I think it's a very good presentation aspect of it. And then it flows into practice. The students actually practice and work together to make sentences. And I think the practice part is a really big part of this lesson because I think the last part is actually producing your own. And that's the producing part is with your homework, with your own homework, because the students will have to rely on themselves to do it. So that's why I think that it's very heavy in the PPP rather than the ESA. So I think it's other than the edits I had to do, I think this is a really good lesson plan, and I think the expressions that were given do work very well. So I hope my lesson critique was reasonable and made coherent sense. I did think about this quite a lot to make sure that I, wrote this in a way that a person like me or a substitute teacher could understand. So anyway, thank you so much for your time. And I hope you have a good day. Thank you so much.